Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Chief Guest, respected Chair of the session, distinguished keynote speaker and panelists, Excellencies, guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you. On behalf of the Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, I warmly welcome you all to today's seminar on Rebuilding Trust, Renewing Regional Integration, Pathways for Revitalizing SAARC. We're deeply honored to have Her Excellency Shama Ubaid Islam, MP, Honorable State Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, amongst us as the chief guest of today's seminar. Distinguished audience, let me briefly outline the sequence of today's program. The seminar will be commenced with the welcome address of Major General ASM Ridwanur Rahman, Director General BISS, who will chair today's sessions. It will be followed by the keynote presentation by Ambassador Tariq Karim, Advisor, Center for Bay of Bengal Studies, Independent University, Bangladesh, and Distinguished Visiting Research Fellow, Institute of South Asia Study, National University of Singapore. Afterwards, there will be a panel discussion. We are privileged to have two eminent panelists with us. First, Professor Dr. Nilay Ranjan Biswas, Professor at the Department of International Relations, University of Dhaka. And then Mohammad Shamsul Haq, former Additional Foreign Secretary, SAARC and BIMSTEC Wing at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and currently CEO, Codus Trust Bangladesh. The panel discussion will be followed by an open discussion session moderated by the session chair. Then we'll hear from the Honorable Chief Guest. Finally, the session chair will deliver the concluding remarks, followed by an memento exchange, photo session, visitors book signing by the Honorable Chief Guest, and lunch. May I now request the chair of today's seminar, Major General ASM Ridwanur Rahman, to kindly commence the program with his welcome address. Thank you.
Thank you, Noor. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Chief Guest, Excellency Ms. Shama Ubaid Islam MP, Honorable State Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Excellencies, esteemed keynote presenter, distinguished panelists, learned audience, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. It's my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome you all to BIS for today's seminar on rebuilding trust, renewing regional integration, pathways for revitalizing SAARC. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Honorable Chief Guest, the esteemed panelists, and all our distinguished guests for taking the time to join us today. Learned audience, SAARC was established with a shared vision of promoting peace, stability, prosperity, and the well-being of the peoples of this region. In due course, the organization faced considerable challenges in sustaining political momentum. Deep-seated geopolitical rivalries and mistrust, asymmetric power dynamics, and institutional stagnation have collectively weakened SAARC's effectiveness and credibility. However, over the past 4 decades, SAARC has also made meaningful contributions in several functional areas, including poverty alleviation, agriculture, health, education, disaster management, cultural exchange, and people-to-people contacts. Institutions such as SAARC Development Fund and various specialized regional centers have demonstrated that cooperation remains possible even amidst political constraints and complexities. Hence, it would be inappropriate to assume that regional cooperation in South Asia has lost its relevance. That's why, without going into debate in today's seminar, we aimed at exploring pathways for revitalizing SAARC. Distinguished guests, to that end, rebuilding trust among the member states is the most essential, yet the most challenging undertaking. However, the changing geopolitical dynamics of the region over the past 1 year or so evince a ray of hope for us. Pakistan's emergence as a credible global mediator, the resurgence of true democracy in Nepal and Bangladesh, Bangladesh's improved bilateral relations with Pakistan and other neighbors, and Bangladesh's Honorable Foreign Minister's leadership role at the UN General Assembly all allow greater scope for Bangladesh to exert meaningful influence and secure an effective mediating role within the region to pave the way forward towards reconciliation and rebuilding trust. Let me humbly remind the learned House that late President Zia Rahman envisaged the importance of greater regional cooperation, and the conceptual framework of SAARC saw the light within these very walls of peace under his visionary leadership. This historical legacy places upon us, both the Bees and the new government alike, a moral obligation and fervor to continue advocating for revitalization of SAARC and adapt a whole of government approach to that end. In this voyage, we also need to take all the regional members and their people aboard. Our primary goal is to determine how common aspirations of the people of this region can be realized concertedly through a pragmatic approach. Dear audience, being mindful that it is not possible to see SAARC's phoenix-like resurrection, we need to gradually build upon small yet visible and attractive gains in undisputed people-centric domains. The selected domains must profoundly resonate with national priorities of all or majority of the member states and reinforce aspirations of the entire regional community. Our initiatives and agenda should also align with global development goals to make it more relevant in today's interconnected yet competitive world. While looking for shared national priorities, enhanced and integrated regional trade framework comes to the mind first, which stands out as a significant gray area. Most literature highlights bureaucratic intricacies, protectionist policies, non-tariff barriers, absence of effective regional connectivity, and so on as key impediments to optimizing regional trade integration, and has recommended numerous corrective measures. In my personal opinion, the prevalent asymmetry among the regional members in terms of population, GDP, overall trade capacity, and so on makes it exceptionally difficult to bridge the gap towards a meaningful and sustainable trade integration. Hence, it demands a candid evaluation, duly supported by rigorous study and evidence-based analysis to assert the most pragmatic approach to such problem solving. In saying so, my intent is not to negate the possibility of integration, rather reiterating the need for a holistic approach during research, analysis, and evaluation. Ladies and gentlemen, revitalizing SAARC should not be viewed merely as an institutional or bureaucratic exercise. We intend to critically examine the structural, political, and all other associated constraints holistically. That's the key to exploring practical pathways grounded on the realities of the regional environment and shared aspirations of the peoples of South Asia. Against this backdrop, BIS has organized this seminar to lay the foundation for continued discussion, dialogue, and debate in reaching a viable and overarching policy recommendation. We intend to hear from our esteemed panelists and you all your views, insights, and propositions, consolidating which we can formulate a comprehensive, all-encompassing pathway to revitalize SAARC. The seminar proceedings will be shared with concerned agencies at the earliest. With this, I wish this seminar to be success and look forward to a stimulating, constructive, and forward-looking discussion. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Esteemed audience, ladies and gentlemen, let us begin with the session. Today, we are extremely privileged to have amongst us a great panel of experts who would set the scene, diagnose the issue from diverse perspectives, and propose their versions of the pathway to revitalizing SAARC. At this point, firstly, we will hear from our distinguished keynote presenter, Ambassador Tariq Ahmed Karim. He is the advisor to the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies and School of Liberal Arts and Social Science at Independent University, Bangladesh. As a seasoned diplomat, he held key appointments and had been the head of mission in neighboring countries and also held key appointments in the ministries and were actively involved in policy making regarding regional integration. So without further ado, I would humbly request Ambassador Tariq Karim to proceed. Sir, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Honorable State Minister for Foreign Affairs, Director General BIS, distinguished guests, friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to join you today for a conversation on a subject that is both intellectually challenging and politically urgent: the unfinished project of regional cooperation in SAARC. I begin with a set of difficult questions. Is SAARC dead, as some have argued since the middle of the last decade? Or is it better understood as comatose? That is something that I have been asserting also since the middle of the last decade. It's still alive, but in a regional intensive care center, still supported by technical programs and organs, professional networks, and the unrealized aspirations of nearly 2 billion people. Why did Europe, ASEAN, and several African regional organizations move, however imperfectly, toward cooperation, while South Asia, despite shared histories, cultures, rivers, markets, and ecological vulnerabilities, remained trapped in mistrust? My central argument is straightforward. South Asia inherited a rigid Westphalian model of sovereignty that never fully corresponded to the region's deeply interconnected civilizational, social, economic, and ecological realities. The partition of 1947 intensified that inherited rigidity by turning fluid spaces into hard borders and shared memories into competing national narratives. SAARC was created as a response to this dilemma, but it has never been allowed to overcome it. In the next few minutes, I will make three essential points. First, South Asia's regional dilemma is rooted in an inherited and rigid understanding of sovereignty, sharpened by the trauma of partition. Second, SAARC's paralysis is not the result of an absence of common interests, but of too little trust to manage those interests. Third, the way forward lies in pragmatic, issue-based cooperation, especially on ecological security, river governance, connectivity, and people-to-people exchange. Now I'll discuss a little bit about SAARC's promise on the present paralysis. The SAARC was established in Dhaka on 8 December 1985 with an ambitious but sensible purpose: to promote welfare, improve the quality of life, accelerate economic growth, strengthen collective self-reliance, and deepen mutual trust among South Asian countries. Nearly 4 decades later, those objectives have not lost relevance. If anything, they have become more urgent. Yet we must be candid. SAARC's political momentum has stalled. Its summit process has remained suspended since 2015. Bilateral tensions have repeatedly overwhelmed regional agendas, and the institution has often appeared unable to respond to the very problems it was created to address. The tragedy is not that South Asia lacks common interests. The tragedy is that South Asia has many common interests trapped inside too much political mistrust. This is why the issue before us is not simply institutional reform. It is the deeper task of rebuilding trust. Without trust, even the best designed institutions remain fragile. With trust, even modest institutions can become vehicles of transformation. What are the lessons we learn from other regional organizations or experiences? Other regions remind us that cooperation is possible even after conflict. Europe, for example, began its post-war integration not with grand political union, but with practical cooperation in coal and steel. Over time, those functional beginnings created habits of interdependence and made conflict less thinkable and cooperation more useful. Europe did not abolish sovereignty. There's an important point which we must all remember. It learned to pool sovereignty, where cooperation produced greater security and prosperity than isolation. The lesson for South Asia is not to copy the European Union. The lesson is that even historical adversities can build cooperation when leaders decide that the future must not remain hostage. Let us not forget that the two biggest powers of Europe, which were historic enemies to each other, not just for decades, but for years, for centuries, they are the two who got together to persuade the other that it is in our interest to cooperate and not to fight. ASEAN offers another lesson. It was born in a region of mistrust, ideological confrontation, and territorial disputes. Other way. Its method was cautious, consensus-driven, and incremental. ASEAN's achievement was not the absence of disagreement. It was the management of disagreement through continuing dialogue and practical restraint, and great wisdom on the part of the largest member among them at that time, Indonesia, ceding space to smaller and less developed member states at the time of its inception. And if you look at the map, you'll understand what I'm looking at. Often we read narratives, but we have no idea of where that narrative is located. We don't understand the geography and the importance of the geolocation and geography. This is something which we must never forget when we are analyzing organizations and forms of cooperation that we are talking about. The African regional organizations such as ECOWAS, which is basically the West African states' aspirations to unity, the SADC, which was a huge example. I was there in South Africa when the Maputo corridor was launched in 1997, operationalizing cross-transit without checks from one end of SADC to the other. And the East African community show that regional cooperation can survive setbacks when there is political will and institutional continuity. Today, their experiments at regional integration would appear to be at an advanced stage of realization of collective goals, and certainly at an exponentially advanced stage compared to ours. The experiences may be imperfect, but they demonstrate a simple truth. Regionalism is not built by perfection. It is built by persistence and unwavering commitment. It would behoove us to remember that most ASEAN, African, and South Asian states were former colonies, just as all South Asian states, except perhaps Nepal, was a former colony. And to also behoove us to remember that the EU was established after losing the individual great power status, although they had colonized all of us in different manners. These South Asian...
Here, from Indian High Commission, the map of India depicted here is incorrect. Jammu and Kashmir is
This-
an integral part of India, and I think the map presented here is not correct.
This map is for representational purposes. It does not project actual boundaries.
I understand, sir, but the Jammu and Kashmir part is an integral part of India, and it is misrepresented here. So I just wanted to point out.
And you are from India?
I am Pooja Jha, Second Secretary, Indian High Commission.
Point is noted. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The puzzle, therefore, is not whether regional cooperation is possible amongst post-colonial societies.
I would also like to raise a point regarding the map, because Jammu and Kashmir is internationally recognized.
So now, before I have finished my talk, we are already in what I've described, that the squabbling over points continues despite the greater objective of cooperating for mutual good. So please allow me to finish, and then I'm willing to take any flack, and I'll give as good as I take in the process. The puzzle, therefore, is not whether regional cooperation is possible among post-colonial societies. Those others which are already successful at regional cooperation were post-colonial societies. What is the difference between them and us? It is clearly that South Asia, with its dense cultural ties, intertwined economies, common ecological systems, and long histories of interaction, has been unable to convert independence into cooperation when other similar colonized peoples in other regions have largely and even remarkably succeeded. Part of the answer lies in the inherited state system. Most South Asian states emerged from colonial rule with legal sovereignty, but also with contested identities, uneven institutions, and deep anxieties about territorial integrity. Colonialism did not merely draw borders, it reorganized political imagination. It encouraged elites to think of security primarily in territorial terms and to view neighboring states less as partners and more as potential threats. The Westphalian model of the state emerged from Europe's historical experience and is commonly associated with territorial sovereignty, legal equality, and non-interference. But when this model was exported to Asia and Africa, it entered societies with very different histories, political cultures, and civilizational geographies. South Asia, before colonial consolidation, was not a set of sealed territorial containers. It was a layered region of empires, princely states, trading routes, pilgrimage networks, linguistic continuums, river basins, and ecological zones. Communities moved, traded, worshipped, married, and migrated across spaces that later became borders. Partition then became a civilizational rupture. It divided families, markets, rivers, railways, ports, memories, and identities. It turned shared spaces into contested territories and everyday mobility into a matter of passports, visas, suspicion, and security clearances. One may think of partition as the division of a family house. The walls may be legally recognized, but the courtyard, the well, the kitchen smoke, and the family stories do not disappear. South Asia continues to live inside that divided house. Its people remain connected by language, food, music, migration, rivers, and memory, while its states often behave as if those connections are threats rather than assets. But the partition also produced an enduring syndrome of insecurity. Nationalism became defensive. Borders became symbolic battlegrounds, and bilateral disputes repeatedly overwhelmed regional possibilities. This is the historical burden that SAARC inherited. President Ziaur Rahman of Bangladesh deserves signal recognition for his visionary initiative for advancing the idea of South Asian regional cooperation in the late 70s and early 80s. Smaller states saw regional cooperation as a way to create voice, balance, and collective development. India and Pakistan approached the idea with caution. Yet the charter was signed in Dhaka in 1985, and SAARC was born with a promise of cooperation and peace, development, welfare, equality, and mutual benefit. From the beginning, however, centrifugal forces were powerful. Partition syndrome, bilateral disputes, competitive nationalism, unresolved grievances, and anxieties about size and influence, they bothered everyone. SAARC's principle of avoiding bilateral and contentious issues made initial cooperation possible, but perhaps, in my view, was at the root of why we were not able to actually address them. You do not solve a problem by ignoring it. Half the solution lies in acknowledging that there's a problem and sitting down and trying to resolve it. In war-devastated Europe, centripetal forces gradually drew states towards shared institutions. They have been fighting for centuries, as I said, but they started coming together. In ASEAN, leaders cultivated restraint and practical engagement despite initial mistrust. In South Asia, centrifugal forces have too often prevailed over the logic of coming together to cooperate for mutual benefit. The result is a paradox. The region most in need of cooperation has been among the least able to institutionalize it. Yet SAARC should not be dismissed as meaningless. Technical bodies, professional networks, chambers of commerce, agricultural cooperation platforms, cultural exchanges, and specialized institutions still demonstrate that the idea of regional cooperation has not disappeared. The political summit process may be frozen, but the regional need remains alive. Rebuilding trust does not mean expecting everybody to suddenly agree. It means changing the way states and societies interact, moving away from seeing one another as permanent threats and towards functioning as neighbors who share a common future. Continuous diplomatic engagement is essential. Vague promises and ceremonial handshakes are not enough when societies are deeply divided. Trust requires visible, credible actions, small at first, but concrete enough to persuade citizens that cooperation is not weakness, but enlightened self-interest. First, South Asia must move beyond rigid sovereignty and zero-sum nationalism. The choice is not between sovereignty and cooperation. The real choice is between isolated sovereignty that cannot solve shared problems and cooperatively pooled sovereignty that enhances collective capacity. Secondly, SAARC should be revitalized from the bottom up as well as from the top down. Even if summit diplomacy remains difficult, technical cooperation should continue and expand. SAARC's functional bodies, agricultural cooperation, besides chambers, parliamentarian networks, academic exchanges, and professional platforms, should be protected from political freeze. These are not substitutes for political leadership, but they can keep the regional bloodstream flowing. Third, where the larger regional process appears stymied, sub-regional cooperation must be pursued with seriousness, sub-region-wise or sector-wise. The BBIN process offers practical possibilities in water, trade, energy, transport, and connectivity. BIMSTEC should be reimagined as a genuine Bay of Bengal cooperation platform to include Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, linking South Asia and Southeast Asia through the Blue Economy platform. The same Blue Economy platform then can extend westward across the Indian Ocean to engulf the Gulf of Arabia and the Persian Gulf. Cooperation does not have to begin with the entire region moving at the same speed at the same time. Willing countries can move forward on specific issues and create momentum for others to follow when they feel comfortable. Fourth, South Asia should shift part of its security imagination from traditional security threat perception to shared, non-traditional but existential threats such as climate change, glacial melt, floods, cyclones, food insecurity, health and water stress. These threats do not respect political borders, nor political compulsions of individuals or groups across borders. They affect citizens on all sides of every denomination, caste, creed, or class of every border. They provide an overriding practical basis for cooperation. Fifth, South Asia must institutionalize habits of dialogue. Dialogue should not be treated as a reward for good political weather. It should be the instrument through which difficult weather is managed. The region needs regular conversations among diplomats, water experts, climate scientists, business leaders, parliamentarians, young professionals, and civil society actors. Finally, cooperation must be urgent, it must be intense, and it must be institutional. But it need not be dramatic. South Asia does not require one great leap forward. It requires many measured steps moving ahead steadily. A river data protocol here, a trade facilitation agreement there, a climate adaptation fund agreement somewhere else, a disaster response platform, a student mobility scheme, an energy grid conversation, a visa relaxation for scholars and professionals. Every piece of this is a step forward. Regionalism is built not only by treaties, but by habits, translated institutionally through continuing operationalization of goals. If there's one domain where South Asia cannot afford paralysis, it is the ecological security domain. Rivers, monsoons, glaciers, deltas, forests, air quality, disease patterns, food systems, and climate risk do not obey political borders. Bangladesh, as a lower riparian deltaic country, understands this reality with particular urgency. The 1996 Ganges Water Sharing Treaty between Bangladesh and India showed that cooperation is possible even on sensitive issues. But the treaty is due to expire in December 2026, and its renewal will test whether the region can adapt old agreements to new hydrological and climatic realities. The Tista remains unresolved, and Bangladesh and India share 52 more transboundary rivers, which remain unresolved, perhaps not only my lifetime, but my children's lifetimes. Among the wider region, water, food, energy, health, and disaster management and climate resilience are regional public goods. We need to address them together. No country can secure them alone. The compulsions of ecological integrity may therefore be South Asia's strongest argument for renewed cooperation. The region should consider shared river basin management, early warning systems, climate adaptation, financing joint research, and a regional ecological security dialogue. Such cooperation would not require states to surrender sovereignty. It would require them to recognize that sovereignty in an age of climate stress is strengthened, not weakened, by cooperation achieved through pooling of it. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, South Asia's dilemma is not the absence of shared destiny. It is the inability so far to organize that destiny through trust, institutions, and imagination. The Westphalian state gave us legal sovereignty. Colonialism gave us administrative borders. Partition gave us trauma. But history need not be a permanent sentence to indefinite imprisonment. The peoples of South Asia remain connected by our rivers, our mountains, our monsoons, the cultures, labor, migration, markets, music, memory, and vulnerability. The question is whether our states can learn to treat those connections not as liabilities, but as foundations for cooperation. SAARC may be comatose, but the idea of South Asian cooperation is not dead. It awaits political courage, intellectual honesty, and institutional patience. The costs of delay are rising, from climate shocks, water insecurity, food stress, public health risk, economic fragmentation, and strategic vulnerability. Cooperation may be difficult, but delay is more dangerous. Let us therefore move beyond asking only why SAARC failed. Let us ask what must be done patiently, pragmatically, and urgently to rebuild trust, renew regional integration, and create a cooperative future worthy of South Asians, peoples, and citizens. I thank you all for your patience.
Thank you, Ambassador Karim, for your insightful deliberation and comprehensively contextualizing the geopolitical and overall landscape of this region. And it was of great significance how, with historical precedences, you recommended the exact modality or the preferred modality for management of disagreement. You have highlighted that we have to focus on building trust, but alongside focus more on issue-based cooperation, maybe even in the form of sub-regional cooperation or formats. So we agree with that, but what we need to remember is that sub-regional cooperation should complement the overall spirit of SAARC, not turn into or undermine its credence. We all agree that in management of disagreement, self-realization of the parties is most important, but what we need to think is what is our role individually and collectively in sensitizing and finding a great mediating approach. Thank you, sir, once again for that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us move on to the first panel discussant, Professor Dr. Neela Ranjan Bishwas, who needs no introduction, is a great scholar, highly renowned, and most of his actions or scholarly articles focuses extensively on regional cooperation, particularly South Asia's security, governance, geopolitics, and etc. So, Dr. Nilay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning and Assalamu alaikum, respected Honorable Chief Guest, respected DG Base. Thank you for the invitation, and I feel privileged to be part of this conversation we are doing on South Asian regionalism and particularly SAARC. So I have tried to imagine a slightly different title, very much in line with the theme of today's program. And because we all are talking about geopolitics, I was exploring whether we can slightly reorient the understanding of geopolitics in the context of South Asia and the idea of meta geopolitics, which is established and also argued by the scholars in the field of international relations, and try to see whether and how it matters in the context of understanding how do we reimagine SAARC in the era of meta geopolitics when we are talking about South Asian cooperation here. A small disclaimer following the discussion of the keynote presenter, respected ambassador, and I'm thoroughly enlightened indeed. The disclaimer is that the figurative expressions are collected from the open source, so it is neither attributed to the institution or myself. So I don't want to fall into the conversation before at least I pitch the argument over here. And I can understand that one need to be eternally optimistic when we talk about South Asian regional cooperation, despite whatever the results of the Football World Cup that you have been following and watching matches, and particularly the morning one. I'm sure the hope of optimism still carries out even if your team is still in the World Cup match or not. Unfortunately, the team that I supported just knocked out in the morning. But I'm still optimistic about South Asian regional cooperation here, and I'll try to do justice in the next 10, 12 minutes over in this discussion. I think the challenges have been discussed thoroughly, and it is at least one thing that we agree that we need to continue the discussion on South Asian regional cooperation in one way or other. And of course, we need to reimagine and reformulate the significance of the SAARC constitution. And if needs be, and if there's a political will that is generated enough to bring the reforms here, particularly when we talk about South Asian or regional cooperation, we can understand there are challenges, there are issues, particularly when we talk about how the institution's constitution has been formulated and whether that is relevant to what extent and what changes need to be there. I think my central proposition in this particular context is that there is the challenge for SAARC is not only political or institutional, it also very much conceptual, particularly when we are revolving around, or in academic tone, we talk about that our ontological orientation is very much state-centric and conventionally geopolitical. And I'm sure the keynote speaker has mentioned areas of meta geopolitics which I think we need to push forward to bring it forth when we are talking about South Asian regional cooperation significantly. It may sound a little bit normative rather than practical, but as I said, that the discussion is significant to think about which areas at this moment we need to prioritize to think about that South Asian regional cooperation is still significant and need to be given significance, not only in academia, but also particularly by the policymakers, practitioners from all areas of the world. So today's issues, as discussed and also highlighted significantly by the keynote speaker, is very critical. That are we really putting forward the issues of climate security, digital connectivity, public health, maritime governance, energy transition, and particularly supply chain resilience? So that's why I think the discussion is significant, because when we are talking about the demography, when we are talking about, okay, there are lackings in the intra-regional trade compared to the other contemporary regional organizations that we are talking about, but have we been explored enough that what are the patterns of cooperation and challenges in those areas apart from the conventional areas of regional cooperation? And that's why the hope needs to be there. We understand why has SAARC been stagnated. There are multiple regions. We highlight the political region. We highlight the mistrust issues. Economists highlight that the existence of intra-regional trade, which is arguably less than 10% compared to 1/4 in ASEAN and more than 50% in European Union. But when we talk about even trade and development, it's very neoclassical economics. We are thinking about trades in a very conventional way, but there are, the informal trade issue has been quite significant in the neighboring region in South Asia, which has never been registered, or there are efforts which has not been significantly addressed. So there are areas which I'm talking about, as has been mentioned by the keynote speaker as well, which is very, very important to highlight. Economy, institutional reform, the conceptual idea of the regional cooperation in a very different way. We definitely agree with the fact that the world has changed in the 21st century. And when we talk about today, we understand the significance of our next door neighbors. Our conventional way, when we think about that region, is basically based on the idea of land-based proximity. I think that has changed quite significantly, because maritime, the idea of ocean in defining and reformulating region, has been quite significant. So when we are talking about South Asia, is it really a strict and significant boundary between Bangladesh and Afghanistan needs to be also reconsidered quite significantly. We acknowledge the economic and significant strategic rise of countries like China, the competitions in ocean, and also significant issues such as digital economy, climate crisis, the revolution which we are expecting and in fact we are experiencing, which is caused by artificial intelligence and supply chain realignment, of whether we are talking about energy and others. But the important fact is that have we also considered the institutional formation, the institution which has followed very Cold War-centric political formation, where of course states-based institution of the regional cooperation is still got highlighted, but maybe there's a time to think about that whether other actors significantly contributing in various affairs, how they are part of the regional cooperation quite significantly, particularly when we're talking about the business communities, other non-state actors, collaborating with the state actors to facilitate the regional cooperation. Here, I propose the idea of meta geopolitics, which is, as I said, arguably quite interesting. There are differences, there are arguments in favor of it, but meta geopolitics is important. And if you follow the movement, the developments in other regional dynamics, for example, in African Union, the formations of different sub-regional African African institutions like SADC or ECOWAS, and also if you look at the developments in ASEAN, the significance of identifying important factors like human security, connectivity, climate action, public health, regional public goods to produce shared resilience is important. So meta geopolitics is something which is not ignoring the idea of conventional geopolitics, but it talks about that it reflects the challenges that are inherently transboundary in nature, considering the Himalayan glaciers, feeding major river system, the Bay of Bengal's shared marine ecosystem, regional electricity trade, cross-border digital infrastructure, or even pandemic preparedness. I was very hopeful when I'm sure that we all remember there was a meeting virtually went on the head of the government, head of the states at the beginning of the pandemic. The patterns of cooperation later on might face certain crisis over there, but I think still the hope was there, and at that moment of discussions, that how we can extend our cooperation to face the preparedness for facing particularly a pandemic. But so these are some of the areas where we need to really think of, and meta geopolitics identifies that geopolitics is not the end of the discussion. That is, perhaps you need to reorient the framing of and highlighting these issues and separating these issues from the conventional ideas of geopolitics. Now, it is difficult. It is somewhat identified as impractical, particularly when we talk about desecuritizing some of these issues, which perhaps create hope for transitions. So, South Asian transition from geopolitical regionalism to meta geopolitical regionalism, and I consciously put a question mark over there because this is probably bringing the debate over here. Now, if we think that if we ever create a political will to highlight some of these very interconnected domains to cooperate, to facilitate cooperation, and even if it is not possible to do it initially through ministerial level meetings, so the formal channels that we have been used to in SAARC, how can we start and bring the non-state actors, important stakeholders, and continue the discussion? For example, maybe bringing the SAARC chambers of commerce, and they do their negotiations, conversations to facilitate once upon agreed free trade agreement in 2004 to 2006, and still that is functional. So the next issue is, can we think about the regional infrastructure? So first, about the conception or the conceptual part of the regional geopolitics, where I'm proposing the idea of meta geopolitics and separating the geopolitics and meta geopolitics to some extent, and it depends on the political will. But the second issue is the regional architecture, the institutional architecture is important. And that is particularly because now we are in the 21st century, and the region is not only defined by the geographical contiguity, but also the idea of, the idea of SAARC Plus. And SAARC Plus is not the new idea. It has been applied in other regional institutions as well. There are observers, dialogue partners, and so on and so forth. But I think it need not to be confined within the state parties. Why can't we also bring other important regional bodies, maybe the pharmaceuticals, maybe the trade bodies and others, to continue the dialogue on cooperation on their particular area? And that is basically the concept promoted by meta geopolitics, that it need not to be always come through the very strategic and political forces, but those are important to facilitate the cooperation. So when we talk about expanding the architecture of cooperation, there are micro-regionalism, which is famously known as sub-regionalism, but we need to be very conscious as well, because sub-regional must complement, and I agree with what DG Sir has just mentioned. But at the same time, we need to also bring more actors, state, non-state, important actors, to continue the negotiation on specific sectors. So sectoral cooperation, which is also key for meta geopolitics, is very important. So when we are talking about how the pharmaceuticals can collaborate of all countries and other relevant stakeholders, it needs to be separated from the broader political cloud at this moment for the sake of the people of the region. That's what meta geopolitics is talking about. And it's a tough job. It sounds a bit impractical because the political cloud, the strategic cloud, totally kind of dominates over everything. But can we separate? Can we desecuritize those very important issues at this moment to enhance the regional collaboration in South Asia? So these are some very ideas, and it's not entirely mine. So I have researched, and I see this has been discussed by scholars already, to talk about how we can make SAARC Plus include more countries. We have 9 observer countries as of now, but we can also incorporate our development partners who are commonly working. We're commonly working with all countries individually and sometimes bilaterally as well. For example, ADB, World Bank, UN agencies, and others. So I think this may sound a bit illustrative, but I think it's not impossible if we can generate the political wills as well. We always talk about what SAARC can learn from others. I think we can learn from the other institutions significantly, but I agree with the keynote speaker who perfectly mentioned that we do not replicate, but we need to acknowledge that in the contemporary time, the concepts of regionalism has changed. And again, I am reiterating that it's not only land-based. So when we are talking about ASEAN, the flexible ideas of regionalism is very important. And how do they manage their disagreement? That's very important. And I think, when, European Union is perhaps a bit distant and very much based on the Cold War-centric patterns of relationship between the European countries. But I think I still imagine that the Treaty of Allies between France and Germany in 1963, which played a very significant role to facilitate a European cooperation, maybe at some point of time in South Asia, we'll have a similar kind of cooperation, because without that, I think it will be difficult to move forward. And holistically, if we even talk about economic union and monetary union in future, rather just being a political union at this moment over here. And we have examples where in Shanghai cooperations, countries work together, which often we probably say that perhaps is a bit difficult when we talk about the future and sustainability of SAARC. Now, why Bangladesh is an avid promoter, facilitator, and supporter of South Asian regional cooperation, SAARC, and also a renewed version of SAARC. I think we have the capacity, and I always request the other 7 countries, and particularly countries who are also facilitator of the idea, supporter of the idea, because it's important to connect our own national public goods to regional public goods over here. And that's something important to create a regional resilience, a terminology which is used by the promoters of the idea of meta geopolitics, is because 4 countries in this region do peacekeeping together under the blue helmet and contributing significantly, in UN environments, in the post-conflict environments. And we have very interesting experience for last 4 decades, and there are informal cooperations on the peacekeeping grounds where countries help each other when they are facing crisis in doing peacekeeping in those areas. So we have not been able to formalize that cooperation, Seva, but we do collaborate with each other in various ways. Climate change, as part of the climate vulnerable forums, countries, we have raised our voice in various multilateral platforms, individually, bilaterally, but we have never raised our voice perhaps as South Asia. I think that's very important. Even if we cannot do that in broader conventional geopolitical platforms, can't we do that as members of CVF, as members of IORA, as members of the UN peacekeeping and peacebuilding enterprise, where South Asia has contributed once 1/3 of the peacekeepers, perhaps not at this moment, but once. Also, digital governance, pharmaceuticals, disaster management, where South Asian countries have significant things to share collectively and individually to the rest of the world, which we are doing, but we need to do it very, collectively. That's what my point over here. That's why we always support SAARC and South Asian regional cooperation, everyone included here. Finally, I think I'd conclude by saying that, it's difficult, but how can we, I'm not saying sidelining and ignoring, but how can we, acknowledging the bilateral disputes, but improve our functional cooperation on the areas which I think the keynote speaker has rightly mentioned, and I'm also emphasizing under the framework of meta geopolitics. It is important, it's not the secondary or low issues as often the conventional IR people used to say. And strengthen the SAARC Secretariat, which is very, very important. I think, still we need to send our best diplomats to there to uphold the spirit of the SAARC from all the countries as per the the current mechanism, and promote dialogue between the publics to generate broader political will. And finally, I think the issue-based and sectoral cooperation needs to be brought here, and the sectors are already been highlighted over there. I think the question for us as South Asians, which I'm sure that is very difficult because still we are very much nationalistic rather than regionalistic. I mean, it's hard to identify ourselves South Asia in many cases, but we often try to do that. That I'm from South Asia. I think the important part is that it's just not about the survival in its own previous format. I think it's important to ask the question that South Asia can redesign how we can redesign the regional cooperation to reflect the realities of a rapidly changing geopolitical and meta-geopolitical landscape. Thank you so much for your patience listening.
Thank you, Dr. Biswas, for looking at the regional cooperation of South Asia from the meta-geopolitical perspective. You rightly said or recommended desecularization by focusing on collective resilience and public goals. But the question remains how success and achievements in those fields can contribute in rebuilding trust and reinforcing appetite. I think the regional architecture with SAARC Plus is a great recommendation. We know Myanmar and China both are already applicant for formal membership. We can discuss that, but more importantly, integrating other development partners, like you said about Japan, Republic of Korea, or the international agencies who can contribute towards the development is a good issue. Rightly mentioned that in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, if China, Pakistan, and India can work collaboratively, why not in SAARC? And finally, strengthening SAARC Secretariat is of great importance. So thank you once again, Dr. Biswas. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we will now look upon the second panelist, Mr. Mohammad Samsul Haq. He is the former additional foreign secretary of SAARC and BIMSTEC in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and currently the Chief Executive Officer of Coders Trust Bangladesh. With his vast experience and exposure to this regional cooperation and being involved personally on different stages of this formation, I think his insights will be of great essence. So, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I would seek a kind permission of the Honorable Foreign Minister, State Foreign Minister, Mr. Director General, and Mr. Professor to allow me kindly to speak sitting here because I'm physically challenged. I love challenges. I could overcome the challenge of coming this morning over here, but still I'm scared of going to the stage. So, first of all, after such two learned speakers, especially the Honorable Ambassador Tariq Karim sir, who is a learned person, he has shifted to wisdom, or kind wise words, and also from dynamic words from the distinguished panelist, Professor Niloy Ranjan Biswas. It will be difficult for me to go through, make a formal speech. That's why I have jotted down some of my ideas I came across while dealing with real issues on the ground, implementation issues. I was part of the mid-level implementation national focal point of Bangladesh at the Foreign Ministry for 6 years. So that gave me some opportunity to come across and address some of the issues. First of all, I would like to speak problems of the SAARC already outlined by the two learned speakers, keynote speaker and the discussant. I would rather say I will focus on the pathway to revitalizing SAARC process. As a practitioner in the Foreign Ministry, I had an opportunity to address and exchange opinion, dialogue, negotiate issues in favor of Bangladesh and in favor of SAARC. From those points of view, I would like to highlight some of the issues. I jotted down. I first of all give you the outline. I have no PowerPoint presentation. Outline what? Rebuilding trust building process. What we need to do, what we can do as a practitioner and the policymakers. For the policymakers at the foreign ministers level as well as the summit level, we need to change the charter. The big problem is charter has not allowed many of the things which we dream of, which we talked about here, but quiet diplomacy, informal diplomacy, inclusive diplomacy, as both the distinguished learned keynote speaker and the professor also mentioned, SAARC Plus. I jotted down following ARF, ASEAN Regional Forum, we can talk of SAARC Regional Forum. And then about some of the political agendas, 3 pillars of ASEAN diplomacy, national, I cannot read my own writing, I'm sorry, strengthening the secretariat, and above all, strengthening the foreign ministry, especially the SAARC wing. And I'll come over there. Also, informal diplomacy and re-engineering the SAARC regional organizations, especially after joining. I take some personal advantage to introduce my company here. After retirement in 2022, I joined as the Chief Executive Officer of a technology training company, an American company named Skodas Trust, and Bangladeshi Americans established this in Dhaka. It is the 12 years. I have been there for 3.5 years. I must talk that one of the blundering mistake, I may not use the word blundering, one of the big mistake was of the 18th summit in 2014, decided to close down one of the human resources development center in Pakistan. It was closed without even it started. Today, as a principal and chief executive officer of a technology company, we train 200 technology skills. In short, we produce freelancers, by the technology. But even now, as technology trainers, we feel scared of the new big thing. I was thinking after joining the company, what is the new big thing after the internet? New big thing has come already 3 years back, artificial intelligence. Brain is everything. You and I might think that we are not part of it, but we are part of it. As I'm talking, as I'm writing a message, talking to my wife, talking to my son, whether with a mobile phone or not, we are the biggest contributors of artificial intelligence in the system. And somebody else with a little bit of expertise is exploiting our contribution in writing. Whenever we talk to digital devices, it is recorded and somebody is reproducing assets and then also cybersecurity is a must to protect ourselves to be hacked by the others. Maybe we can allow, if the representative allows us, Skodas Trust can free of cost have a seminar on artificial intelligence and how we can save ourselves and save Bangladesh, and also train the human resources. So first of all, talking about the trust building, we have to identify what are the areas where trust do not work. Charter has excluded bilateral political issues to be discussed outside. So, but it has, as you have kindly seen, political issues already entered the room. Political issues entered the agenda of the SAARC, whether we address or not. Another aspect, Indo-Pakistan issues, political issues and security issues, we ignored that. There is another problem, Afghanistan. After Taliban took over, Afghanistan is no more sitting on the meetings, mid-level meetings, informal meetings, and so that will have to be addressed. Another issue is informal diplomacy is excluded. There is no scope to discuss informal issues because any negotiation, any issues we negotiate bilaterally or multilaterally, we have to start from somewhere, start from zero. But SAARC mechanism does not allow. Of course, sometimes meetings, chair can decide to have an informal session for half an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. But in a formal meeting, formal setup, informal things cannot be discussed. Sometimes, so how to do it? My policy is to start it. Let us start by ourselves. So informal discussion needs informal settings. this trust building process should be discussed informally. And we have to find out what are the trustworthy mechanism, trustworthy issues, what we have trusted already, and what we have not trusted. We separate the issues. Building on the trusted areas of activities, we can, like neighboring countries, do one thing good. That is in BIMSTEC process I have seen. They invite a lot of political, sectoral, security, and business issues informally. They pay for it, they organize. Whoever comes or whoever do not come, it doesn't matter. They have informal seminars, informal meetings, and they, whatever is the finding of the, excuse me. So Bangladesh can start with the Honorable Foreign Minister, Honorable State Foreign Minister, with the support of the SAARC wing, which should be strengthened. And that informal meetings can be invited in Bangladesh from the SAARC countries, not in the name of SAARC countries. I remember during the COVID time, Indian Prime Minister invited an informal meeting from the heads of governments of the SAARC countries. Did not say SAARC meeting, because SAARC meeting needs consensus, but SAARC countries for what can be done for the COVID. So it was attended by most of the heads of the states, except Pakistan with the health minister. So I do not I'm not talking about Indian successors, Indian success stories, but we can learn from them. We can learn from anybody. Whatever is learnable, we must learn. When we learn from somebody, that is a trustworthy step. And what we appreciate, when we appreciate somebody's good works, that is the first step of trust building. So since trust building is on the agenda, we must do things. And also beyond SAARC, we can start with Myanmar, we can start with Iran or some east and west. On the south, China is already a member of observers body in the SAARC, though it is not working. So that, and in the meeting, we can have another round of this host countries, like sectoral issues, probably about sectoral issues. Forensically level meetings, of course, do not take place, except the highest level meeting is programming committee. When the programming committee, expert committees meet, one day members, participants can visit the host country's capital one day early. One day early, they can have an informal session. Host country can, even Bangladesh hosts many meetings. We can host a dinner or lunch previous day. In the name of sightseeing, they can sit and they can discuss. Because without norming, things will not be forming. So we need, but that small space of time do not allow so many informal things. And at the same time, as I said, Bangladesh Foreign Ministry is very vibrant now. Is learned people are occupying the right positions, but financially, SAARC focal point should be strengthened financially and with authority also. So another aspect of, we're lucky that Bangladesh SAARC Secretary General is now from Bangladesh. And another good point, the Secretary General cannot speak for Bangladesh alone. He can always speak for agenda. What are the issues that are bottleneck for his work to implement? He can informally discuss with the member states. And Bangladesh Foreign Ministry's SAARC wing can be strengthened. His duty is multifarious, to discuss and to informally negotiate with the sectoral ministries, development ministries. There are already 20 areas of cooperation under nine headlines. So human resources is one. It can be discussed. The Human Resources Development Center cannot be revived without SAARC Leaders Summit, but it can be discussed. In Bangladesh, a number of sectoral ministries look after this, starting from ICT ministry to to expatriate ministry and another social affairs ministry. So these ministries, sectoral ministries, and directorates can be discussed by the foreign ministry and brought them on the agenda in one line with us, in one line with Bangladesh. An honorable Prime Minister, honorable Foreign Minister can bilaterally discuss whenever they visit outside other than SAARC countries also, and seminars and BISS can play a very vital active role by hosting similar analytical critical seminars like this, where member states from outside, or if not possible immediately, at least ambassadors from SAARC countries and ASEAN countries, if EU countries, can be discussed. A day-long or 2 days long seminars can be organized, where honorable foreign minister can speak, honorable state foreign minister or a honorable advisor of the foreign ministry, and senior officers can have day-long discussions. Agendas can be set, and informal discussions can be held, because trust building always should start informally. Formal trust building through negotiations, brainstorming is not possible always. It brings debates, but debates can be debated, issues can be debated. But first of all, we have to find out what are the areas we already have trust. On this issue can be another session. So I'm not taking too much time. So SAARC Regional Forum can be one opening point. Honorable Foreign Minister's invitation of SAARC areas and other than SAARC areas can have day-long retreat can be there, informal retreat, sightseeing, and also already discussion. But before that, foreign ministry should start the trust building process informally, since formally it is not possible. So having said that, I want to stop here. Some of the issues, Secretary General's Secretariat, I have some suggestions. I already deposited it in the similar seminar several months back, that Secretary General is given for 5 years, should be for 5 years, at least for 5 years. And directors from the member states should be minimum 5 years. And there will be some deputy directors or assistant director level permanent position, if not for 5 years, if not at least minimum for 10 years, because knowledge and expertise should be in the permanent. ASEAN has similar system. They have deputy secretary general, several ones, and also at the headquarters, at the SAARC secretariat, there should be some permanent officials. We have some permanent supporting staff, even there for 5 years only. Some local staff are permanent, but they cannot be the knowledge replicating agents. So coming again, we can informally SAARC can informally work as human resource development agent, starting with artificial intelligence. So our chairman, Mr. Aziz Ahmed, is a global technology leader. He's an American company owner. He runs a $200 million company in USA. So he's Scottish Trust. He doesn't take any profit. He only contributes for national interest. So we will discuss it separately. So we can have a free of cost artificial intelligence seminar. All of you can participate, and some lectures will be given by some experts, teachers. But by the way, artificial intelligence is new in Bangladesh, new in the world. So, having said that, wishing all success of this seminar, and thank you for inviting me. I thank everybody, and thanks to the learned audience. And thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting some of the very important issues like reviewing the charter to have provisions for informal diplomacy, which can create space and may contribute to trust building. You rightly gave example of the COVID situation, how the head of states collaborated together. The idea of SAARC Plus reinforcing another dimension, that SRF in line with ASEAN Regional Forum, regarding capacity building of the South Asia and SAARC BIMSTEC wing of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think that's a good suggestion for having think tank association of the region hosting at BIS. So I take that and we will look forward to doing it. You also highlighted about a proposition of having informal interactions from the under the auspices of Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the regional head of missions. And finally, some of the specific recommendations regarding restructuring of I think SAARC Secretariat with permanent members for institutional memory. So once again, thank you very much, sir, for your deliberation. Ladies and gentlemen, now let us move on to the next session, which is possibly the most exciting. Our today's audience represents an impressive blend of seasoned diplomats and bureaucrats, avid scholars and researchers, practitioners, and most importantly, representatives of the new generation. While we expect the veterans to complement and substantiate the recommendations from the esteemed panelists, citing their own experience, we're equally eager to hear from this generation, their perception, their innovative ideas to realizing the dream of revitalizing SAARC. With that, I open the floor. First, with kind permission, we will hear from the new generation. So you may raise your hand. So we'll go first with the new generation. If they have some suggestions, then we'll come back to you. Okay, I think in the fourth row I have, so after you.
Thank you. This is Jadul Karim. I'm working as a monitoring and evaluation associate at Center for Policy Dialogue, CPD. Honorable Minister, we know regional organizations often go through periods of dormancy before finding new momentum. Bangladesh, as SAARC's founding architect, seems to be playing that regarding role once again today. Given the current challenges, including tensions between India and Pakistan, and the rise of other regional frameworks like BIMSTEC, what gives you the most significant, most confidence that this revitalization push can succeed where earlier efforts haven't? Thank you.
Any more? Yes, hands. Yes. So I will come to Mr. Deepa. I will come to you. I think there is a lady. Yeah.
Greetings, everyone. This is Assistant Professor Fatimatu Zohra from Department of IR, Bangladesh University of Professionals. I have a question to Professor Niloy sir. Sir, I was a student of yours in South Asian Affairs course, and you were also hopeful back then, like 10 years ago, and we're also hopeful right now. But the question is it possible to, achieve the idea of South Asian connectivity or integration while the political disputes remain? And as I am teaching the Gen Z generation and like the young mind, they have many questions regarding this as well, but they also ask this question, isn't it possible to have like a classroom where we can have students from different universities of South Asia? So yes, they are asking these questions as well, like how to build the trust. But the question remains as well, like how we can integrate corridor diplomacy or informal diplomacy where the summits are still not happening. So in this case, how we can gain trust where the political, the contentions are really, really severe and critical. Thank you so much.
Yes, can I? Okay, Mr. Tanvir Mohammed Dipu from FBCCI.
Thank you very much. It is very pleasure to say something about SAARC. Many speakers already said the problem of SAARC. But I tell you something, but now this time the SAARC is now stagnant because India and Pakistan are no longer trust. So our main problem, the business sector, we are the mainly import-based country. Our two countries import, China and India. First China and second India. And our largest export destination USA. So now the time we are the big problem. USA tariff, India and Pakistan and China clash. I think India and Pakistan may become a terrible war within a few years, I think. So the Minister of Foreign Ministry, I tell you something, Bangladesh can again maintain the SAARC and revive the SAARC, and the Foreign Ministry of Bangladesh should maintain this SAARC again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody from the back? Okay, I see a hand at the back. Yeah. Respect. Sir, we'll come back to you. I will come back to you.
This is Ikramul Hussain, student, Government of Politics, Jahangirnagar University. I have question, Nino sir. Can we introduce SAARC X minus 1 formula that enforce the ASEAN X minus 1 formula? One question, really can possible for political issue from SAARC that the historical conflict India Pakistan, now Afghanistan Pakistan, it is possible for far away and political issue. Thank you.
Okay, I think we had 4 comments or questions. I will now fall back to the panelists and then we'll go for the second round. So firstly, Dr. Linlay.
Thank you so much. I think 2 questions directly suggested to me. So I'll try to address. Number 1, is it really possible to achieve the or revive the SAARC, if I understand, particularly the idea of connectivity? As I told in my discussion as well, and I think all the speakers have also mentioned that you need to. I think we all need to think of how we can redesign the collaborations and the patterns. Connectivity is a term that we have been watching it in the academic and policy literatures as well in the last less than 2 decades, particularly 1 decade and a half. And when we are talking about connectivity, and there were multimodal plannings which were connecting through South Asian countries as well. But I think the maritime connectivity has added a very significant possibility over here. And that includes SAARC plus model. That's I think, very important for us. And I am still positive when we are talking about connectivity, and if we kind of little bit broaden the idea of connectivity apart from the infrastructural one, where we talk about, whether it is about health, health tourism is one of their, education is very important. And as you have rightly mentioned, that still we are looking for an opportunity when we talk about whether students can do classes from different universities in South Asia. I had it in my discussion that South Asia University is one of the ideas that I still applaud that SAARC had among many collaborations that they had. But the problem is, due to the region, due to the nature of the political discussions, the idea of South Asia University has been also been trapped in a monopolistic structure. It did not expand, although the original idea was that every country will have their campus and depends on the country's academic advantage. And now South Asia University has been struggling with funds. There were issues of many other South Asian countries are not providing enough funds that they were committed to do that. So this is the challenge that we have. But do we really need to have an infrastructural composite mechanism of a South Asian university in one particular city in South Asia? Why can't all the big universities in different South Asian cities can collaborate together and have virtual classes or hybrid classes? And at this stage, it's not necessary to have one particular infrastructural composite to expand the collaboration, whether it is in education or it is in health, or it is in climate change. It's just a matter of political will to let the others to discuss. If there is a problem at the G2G level at this moment on some issues, why can't the non-G2G level can continue the discussions over there? And think tanks obviously have a very big responsibility over here. So we can understand that there are challenges, and I'm not too much optimistic about a war. I still think about that, perhaps, it's more about collaborations. Conflicts and tensions may arise around the border, and that's not, war. War is, in strategic studies is a big thing. So, and the last question is from the Jahangirnagar University. I think is a very important one. SAARC plus, SAARC minus, ASEAN had its own geopolitical dimensions and realities. For us, it's difficult to have a SAARC minus concept at this moment. Perhaps it's better to be more inclusive in the nature. That's, I think, my single line answer, but I can explain in the tea and coffee break why I said so. I think, I'd stop here, and if there's another opportunity to discuss more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mr. Samsullah, very briefly, if you have anything.
Yeah, actually, it is possible. It is on the agenda. It was on my list also. How we can do it again informally, it can be done. In ASEAN, it is on their charter. They can exclude some of the member states who can opt out in implementing a project, but they don't mind if some countries do not have interest, but they do not mind. It is agreed already. But in our case, practically, it sometimes happens. Like I remember on road SAARC road network, it can be Maldives and Sri Lanka is not connected in that connectivity road network. I mean land transits. So sometimes we have it. They opt out. They will not participate, but they consent on holding the meeting and taking the agenda, given their contribution is not used in that one. Of course, contribution is used in the meeting, held in the meeting, but real project will be contributed by other agencies. So thank you. We are working on that.
Ambassador Karim, anything, sir?
I think the two main questions have already been addressed about the configuration of SAARC and BIMSTEC. Bangladesh has always punched above its weight in trying to promote regional cooperation. And that is very, very natural and logical for us, because if you look at where you are situated, we cannot think of being isolated. Our progress and growth depends on our ability to trade with countries around us, because trade is now one of the most important functions of interstate relations, dealing directly into transforming human societies and their economic well-being. And that was one of the main reasons why President Ziaur Rahman, the late President Shahid Ziaur Rahman, reached out. He wanted this because we cannot, having emerged as a state, an independent state in the Committee of Nations, cannot develop in isolation. Our geography dictates that we have to connect and bring others into the fold. And therefore, we took the initiative when others did not dare. I think that is we should take height from there. So SAARC, certainly, I mean, I endorse that we should continue taking the initiative to try and galvanize all forms of regional cooperation, because we cannot develop without the region, like the region cannot develop without us. These are interconnected, intercore. Secondly, I mean, even BIMSTEC is incomplete. It was a smart move in retaining the acronym for Bangladesh, India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand economic cooperation to call it the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. But it's not Bay of Bengal, because we have left out three of the most important countries of the Bay of Bengal. The least ones are not there. So the idea was incomplete. I would urge that we think beyond land-centric conceptualization of ourselves. We have historically been a bridge nation, whether it is part of the modern state system after 45 or during the British system when we were part of, we constituted the biggest part of the British administrative structure, or during the Mughal period when we were one of the most prosperous provinces of undivided India, or even earlier when there were interactions between China and India and travelers coming from Europe going to China, because we were the bridge. They came here, they passed through us, and in the process, we also prospered. We learned from them, they learned from us. That is where human connectivity is important. And I think we should do that. SAARC, I think we should abandon this idea of SAARC plus or SAARC minus. We should do what helps Bangladesh move forward with this objective. Going into any extreme forms is not like to help the project of restarting conversations.
Thank you, sir. Just to supplement, I think it's my way of looking at, instead of defining or naming it sub minus, I think sub-regional platforms sounds better. And if you look at the charter, the specific role of the action committee that deals with the projects where only the willing members of the SAARC can collaborate and work out. So the provisions are there, we need to just explore. So now we move on to the second round. I think the third row, first man, dance, and then maybe Mr. Shami, I'll fall back to you next.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Mizanur Rahman, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Cultural Affairs. And I am the governing board member of SAARC Cultural Center, Colombo, Sri Lanka, where I work as a chairperson in the last 2 years. Regarding this cultural center, we know that the cultural cooperation is can play a vital role for revitalization of SAARC. In the last year GB meeting, we recommended some activities and program, but unfortunately, it was not approved in the programming committee meeting in SAARC Secretariat. In Bangladesh, we are like to introduce some SAARC Film Festival and this SAARC Literary Fest, but unfortunately, it was not approved by the SAARC Secretariat. My question is that how we can survive if we cannot make this cultural cooperation among the SAARC region. I think that will be not benefited for the member states of SAARC region to exchange cultural agreement or cultural exchange program. You know that Afghanistan, except Afghanistan, Bhutan, we have without Afghanistan and Bhutan, we have another SAARC region, so we have a cultural exchange program. In the last year, SAARC Cultural Center organized a heritage forum and the SAARC Culinary Festival in the Bhutan. Only 4 member of states were there. I think more emphasis need to be exchanged to promote a cultural program like SAARC Film Festival, SAARC Musical Instruments, SAARC Dance Program, and many programs. This is my request to the audience and the panel list for make SAARC as a work for the cultural cooperation in the SAARC regions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Shami.
Thank you, President, and thanks for holding the event. As many of my generation of foreign service officers would recall, I vividly remember the day when, I'm beginning on a personal note. I vividly remember the day when SAARC was launched in December 1985. I was serving in the ministry as director level officer at the time. The organization started very well initially. I mean, things were moving smoothly with a lot of high hopes and optimism. The first summit was in Dhaka, the second was in Bangalore, third was in Kathmandu. So I think the first hiccup occurred in December 1992 over the Babri Masjid incident. Now, my next question to Ambassador Tariq Karim, excellent presentation. I mean, as one would expect from an officer of your caliber. You have not really dwelt upon how you think Bangladesh can play a role on revitalizing SAARC, I mean, taking fresh initiative now that we have a new government. I mean, not very new, they've been there for almost 5 months, or you have given up on it. And if you have given up on it, is your stint as High Commissioner in Delhi for about 5+ years and instructive to this. And we often talk about, I mean, we all know the reason for the stalemate in SAARC, I mean, the relation between two particular member countries. But may I recall that even SAARC summit has provided an appropriate opportunity and platform for making serious attempt at resolving this problem, because back in 2004, when the Islamabad summit took place, I was the High Commissioner in Pakistan. And before that, the India-Pakistan relations that really soured over this Kargil thing and all, you see. And but then there was this famous, well-known Islamabad declaration between the two countries, between Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and President Pervez Musharraf. So even the SAARC summit has effectively worked in breaking ice. So that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Shamim, another. Thank you very much to BIS for again organizing this particular seminar. Very topical, and happening at this time makes it even more challenging because of that. Also, my deep respect and appreciation to the keynote speaker, Ambassador Tariq Karim sir, and Professor Neela Ranjan, the panelist, and our colleague, Mr. Shamsul Haq, for elaborating on the very highly acclaimed presentation by Ambassador Tariq Karim. I think revitalizing SAARC immediately tells us that there is a lack of vitality, and it started not yesterday. Actually, it had started many years back. And one may be allowed to even say that when Shahid President Ziaur Rahman proposed this, some think that the proposal hit at a developing national narrative of domination in the region. We remember as students, South Asia was characterized by Indo-centric, and that is not without reason. So from that, or perceiving that as a threat, came, I think, the mindset which precluded bilateral political issues to be raised in the SAARC forum and enshrined in the charter. So how to start really removing that mistrust? And we are also talking about, as Ambassador Tariq Karim said, there is an asymmetry between all the members, and very, very specific, hard realities are there. Why this asymmetry exists. So the question would be to how to take functional initiatives that obviate to some extent that asymmetry. We are optimistic, but an optimism which must be grounded in realities. By now, we have seen and lived through those asymmetries which have come to be really a stumbling block. So my idea is that we have to start by, it's very difficult to say educating, but at least sensitizing our people, because the people-to-people relationship is the greatest asset for SAARC, which must be highlighted and taken forward. How do we do that? If we look around even the past few years, the role played by the media, and I'm not pointing at any particular country, it's not conducive to revitalizing SAARC. Now, how do we do that? How to make conducive discussion of SAARC that will not hinder but help the revitalization of SAARC? I relate to the question raised by, I think, a teacher from BUP. And there, I think we have a clue that we could talk about SAARC in the media without raising the polemics. It is a tendency to focus more on the polemics and the unsubstantiated, but not much on the facts. So that is a very important thing to my mind.
Then the most important thing related to this is, as Ambassador Tariq Karim sir said, about habit, forming habit of cooperation. And that must be started at the level of the youth. They are our future. Do we see enough youth discussion again on facts, not on polemics? If you look around any congregation of young people, and if there are discussion about political issues, it seems to me that mostly we face or raise questions which have some polemic nature. It's not so much to look at the common points where we can benefit from. Um, so it seems to me that looking inside us is more important than looking for issues that have not helped us very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I think there was two hands, one with the, first one. With respect. Yeah.
Good noon, ma'am and sir. So I am a third year international relations student from Bangladesh University of Professionals, and I'm particularly very fascinated by the concept of transforming the traditional geopolitics to meta geopolitics and how the idea of SAARC plus has been evolved. So my question is a shift from geopolitics to a meta geopolitics from the given South Asian context, that a shared threat like the climate migration, climate change, water scarcity, and water security gaps are there. So can the non-traditionals and the multidimensional vulnerabilities that are present we are facing serve as a catalyst for the SAARC revival by forcing the members to cooperate where the traditional hard power diplomacy has been failed? Thank you very much.
Good. The other one, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Rayana Binte Siddiq. I am a student of Department of Government Politics at Jahannagar University. According to Niloy sir, we are optimistic that SAARC can be revitalized. So my question is, if SAARC is successfully revitalized, so do you think the strategic competition between USA and China could indirectly affect the SAARC's effectiveness? If yes, how should SAARC maintain its strategic autonomy? Thank you so much.
Ma'am, in the middle.
South Asian Regional Standards Organization. My question is from Dr. Nilay. You have very precisely discussed areas of regional geopolitics as well as meta geopolitics, and that which areas need to be prioritized that can contribute to regional integration, as well as that there is lack of intra-regional trade in South Asia, and that more sectoral stakeholders may contribute towards regional integration. For example, trade agencies. So, apart from the geopolitical dialogue, we know that technical cooperation can also contribute to regional cooperation. So, this is my idea as well as my query as well. That is it possible somehow for the stakeholders, relevant stakeholders, of course, to devise a mechanism or pathway that technical cooperation among the SAARC member states continues despite political circumstances, or if there is any provision already in place, if you can please enlighten on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more? Yeah.
Good noon. This is Pariza, the student of International Relations in Bangladesh University of Professionals. As many of the questions raised before mine focused on a similar topic, I wanted to ask that the panelists were talking about how the shift of focus of regional integration should be based on issue-based, non-traditional security factors as we go forward with regional integration and possibly the revitalization of SAARC. Now, considering that these factors require transnational cooperation among the states, and the fact that how heavily nationalistic the states in South Asia are, and the aspirations and the positions are very much nationalistic, is there any space for regional integration focused on these non-traditional security factors? And if there is, what are really the ways to gain that kind of integration? That is my question, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, ma'am.
Um, Thank you, Chair, for organizing such a timely discussion. I am Professor Shamsunar Khanum from Jahangirnagar University, Department of Government and Politics. I actually want to share one of my significant views that I believe firmly that one of our honorable discussants focus on informal relationship between among the countries of SAARC. In that consideration, I do firmly believe that as an academician, I want to rely on the youth engagement, very specifically university students' engagement of the countries of SAARC. Greater academic collaboration, research partnership, and students' mobility. These all are the informal engagement. So we can establish different SAARC universities among countries, member states. I think it will accelerate the relationship between the youth, among the youth, and it all over the environment of SAARC, and it will improve all our past integration, and it also actively SAARC will actively work. That was the visionary, real sense Zia Rahman, the then president, wanted to build. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any more hands? Yeah, Ambassador Mahbub.
Sorry to encroach. I think we have a time constraint also. So just lastly, but not the least, the primary rationale for revival and re-energizing of SAARC should be economic cooperation. In this context, when I was in the foreign ministry, I distinctly remember there was a group called the Group of Eminent Persons constituted by SAARC mandate. It was vision by 2020. So it envisaged a free trade area, and then we would have a customs union, and then we have economic union. So it was it had to be done in a phased and economic and systematic manner. And it also envisaged South Asian Development Bank, poverty alleviation, and enhanced connectivity. So Professor A.T. Karim sir also rightly pointed out, then we could have issue-based cooperation on these areas, like especially on poverty eradication and connectivity issue. Like non-contentious. And since we have a time constraint, I will just cite my personal experience. Then we were participating in the committees of the SAARC. We know that programming committee is very important, and in that we had a lot of dialogue, discourse, disagreements on budget and programming issues. My suggestion is that there should be clear political directives, that we could have informal consultations, where Mr. Samsul Haq also told that before this formal, standing committee programming committee meetings, we could have informal consultations among ourselves. We should fix our objectives and targets, and there should be directions from the standing committee and also from the Council of Ministers. So to agree on some common or broad format based issues. So I will end at that.
Thank you, sir. Any more? Okay, then I think we have a lot. So I turn the floor to the esteemed panelists. So Nilo can start, or Mr. Tariq?
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I think there are 2 or 3 questions broadly, but particularly asked to me. Right. One area is when we are talking about strategic autonomy of a regional organization. This is something that is not enough discussed in the literature, but also politically or practically speaking, I think it's strategic autonomy is more applicable to the nation state, and that relates to the question that the other student was also asking about, particularly when we are talking about the transformation of nationalistic attitude of the state towards a more collective, position. But going back to that, I think it's I think the first question is that the pattern of cooperation, and since you have also referred the position of our next to neighbors or extra regional powers influence in the region, which I think is something that is very much contextuous on particular sectors, so it will be over there. But I think a very important position from within the region will perhaps provide some sort of advantage collectively among the states who will be working on a particular issue, whether it is on education, culture, economy, and the other sectors. I understand this is a more academically or theoretically correct answer, but perhaps the first question that we need to ask is that how we are dealing collectively with all our development partners, including those who are in the regional sectors. The second point, I think, ma'am, in the third row has asked particularly the technical cooperations. I mean, during the functional time of SAARC, I think some of the very important agreements, MOUs, understandings have held on quite an interesting areas. Two or three have really attracted our attentions. Number one, that we have some sort of understanding on how do we do disaster management in South Asia. We had also a climate policy once upon a time. Now, I think those are the areas which could have been expanded forward and discuss that how can we still collaborate, because these are the areas where I think along with the government actors in South Asian region, the development partners and non-government organizations have done tremendous work in disaster management and also representing us in the climate conferences of the United Nations. And they have their intra-collaborations in different sectors. Countries are working together in other platforms. So we should facilitate that technical collaborations along with other areas that is definitely there. And the last, a small bit, I think, I agree with Ambassador Mahusa had just mentioned about the economic collaborations. But my only, 2 cents here is that when we talk about economic cooperations following the conventional regional collaboration pattern, like European Union has showed us the way, how do we do, and transformatively starting from coal and European steel cooperation to a monetary union and then a political union, I think that's a problematic path or path dependency, we call it in functionalism, to follow for South Asia at this moment. One of the reasons that classical economists would say, the followers of Adam Smith, that 5% inter-regional trade. Even if you leave that and consider the informal trade that is happening within South Asia, that perhaps there is no official data what is the total percentage. So that's why I'm a little bit doubtful that PTA, FTA, monetary unions are a little bit difficult for this region, rather than the other sectors that we have discussed here would probably encourage us to go forward towards those conventional factors of regionalism. Thank you, sir.
Ambassador Tariq.
All these questions actually relate to one another in one way or the other. So I will give my general remarks to try and cover everything, because it's a failing of mine that I cannot see things in compartments. Everything is linked to everything else. Every issue raised is connected with something else, and we tend to forget that because we have developed a partitioned way of thinking everything. Empowerment or giving more autonomy to the institutions. I think one of the fundamental weaknesses of whether we call it the SAARC Secretariat or the BIMSTEC Secretariat is that they need to be given more autonomy. The Secretary General is just another super official who's been posted there. He's at the mercy and the whims of the different governments coming and meeting and giving him the directors. He is dependent on them, begging for money for different projects. So he, embarking on technical discussions, we have the framework for doing all these, undertaking all these. They do not have the power or the autonomy to decide on programs and convene meetings, because they don't have the money or somebody has not given them the green signal. SAARC can actually work. I mean, we should look at the European Union Secretariat, how it works. It works like a government of its own. They have their own programs, they have the budget contributed, and then the heads, they take the decisions according to how much money they're going to spend, where and what sector, and in which area of the world, because it's not just European Union development, they have a global approach. The same is the Commonwealth Secretariat. The Secretary General has huge autonomy. They have a budget, they decide which programs they will fund, they call the meetings, they don't have to depend on all the heads of the governments or the foreign ministers to come and give them the clearance. This is where I think both SAARC and BIMSTEC suffer from the same institutional weaknesses. The Secretary Generals and their officials are glorified officials enjoying a status somewhere else, but unable to really move forward with the many ideas that they come to them. So technical, the scope is there. They have to be empowered to do that. Suggestion came, I think, from the business community about involving business in it. And yes, that's an excellent idea. Maybe if business wants to improve, business can only increase if they cross borders. And it is for them to have the ability to be able to cross borders without visas and without tariff restrictions, whether they are para-tariff, non-tariff, or actual tariff barriers. How do you address it? Maybe they can come in, help the government funding by giving endowments to these institutions to say, will you work on this? We will work with other business partners across to start this, so that you do not become shackled by the lack of funds to undertake these projects. They can undertake, and it doesn't have to be high-cost get-togethers. It can even be in the age of digital connectivity. There can even be webinars with minimal cost. I think a question was asked about big power involvement, and we basically go right into where US and China figure in this. Well, US and China are both partner countries of SAARC to begin with. SAARC is already embroiled in the global geopolitical tectonic shifts now underway. I think the challenge for SAARC is to detach itself from this geopolitics, to focus on what it wants to do, and not be hostage to the forces of the geopolitics, trying to dictate them or push them in one direction or the other. Then there was we have, I mentioned about the institutions. We have several institutions. Why can we not? I mean, Bangladesh hosts two of the regional centers, the regional SAARC Agricultural Center and the SAARC Meteorological Center. Why don't we ourselves, if we are so keen on initiating, start programs of discussion? We can invite people from the other SAARC countries to come and listen and talk. We should. Yeah. So it can be done without political interference. My colleagues over here pointed out about the role played by the statesmanship of Vajpayee in overturning something which had been shut down. Statesmanship matters. I alluded to how ASEAN was formed. ASEAN also had problems because some of the ASEAN countries were also infected by this colonial bug that we are all laid flat by. But ASEAN, one member was not a colony. He was never colonized, but was Thailand. But Indonesia had big problems, border problems and identity problems and conflicts with other nations. And yet, it's a growing concern. Why? Because Indonesia, the largest, the reason I showed the map was to give you an idea that size matters, but size also matters in the wisdom and sagacity it displays towards the other to grow. They had a common purpose. So Adam Malik of Indonesia persuaded Suharto to step back, give the others the courage to come forward and say, you develop. Now the other countries are, in a sense, some of them are more economically advanced and developed, but they're all working together. Malaysia split apart. When it didn't split apart by fighting each other, the statesmanship came in, the leaders understood that if we continue to force the will of one on the other, there will be bloodbaths. And the bloodbaths were avoided by simply having a civil divorce and then living as friends together. These are lessons which we need to learn. I mean, it's just because we have been colonized by the British and our minds have been twisted in a certain manner that we should continue to remain hostage to that. We need to break away from that. And unfortunately, I mean, there's a spat on lines on the map or the geography. These lines are artificial maps, lines as far as I'm concerned. I'm making an incendiary statement here. But imagine that entire contour without the lines. Then can you sit down? Let me take, I mentioned non-traditional area being perhaps the most pertinent to moving it forward. Does climate recognize the borders of the lines on the map? Does water security or earthquakes or famine or pandemics recognize these borders? What do we do when these occur? What does the well-being, collective well-being of our citizens recognize that the Gulf War has disrupted the supply chains of energy, which is going to create a tremendous food problem? Agriculture will be hit hardest because 40% of the global fertilizer comes through that. It's not just the oil. There's fertilizer, there's phosphate, there's sulfuric acid, there's helium, and all these things are needed for everything that we are doing in our hospitals or clinics or farms. And it happens instantly. It doesn't need time to travel. Something happens there, within 5 seconds you'll feel it here because your supply chains have collapsed. The people are starting scrambling around how to tackle it. So we have to think out of the box here. And basically, yes, there are contentious borders, etc. I'll address what Ambassador Mahbub, my good friend over there, raised. Why aren't we focusing more on economic cooperation? And I will cite a metaphor I used to teach international relations of South Asia class in George Washington University way back in 2005, 2006, around that time. And I was asked a similar question. And I said, okay, if you think of SAARC becoming, or the region becoming, an engine of growth, imagine that you want a car perfectly designed, and you design the best car that you want with all the features of every excellent car that you can think of, whether it's a Lincoln or a Mercury or a Mercedes or a BMW, put everything together. And then finally you have a shining model in your porch. Now you have to get into that, and then get out of the porch if you want to go somewhere. What do? You have to turn the key for the ignition. The ignition will switch on the electrical circuitry, whether it is the internal combustion engine or electronically, digitally controlled electrical circuitry. If that doesn't turn, your car is not going to move anywhere. The electrical circuitry is the politics. So you have the engine there, but the engine will not move unless the politics functions. That is one of the problems. Number two, if you want to move, even if the engine turns, it will depend on how much fuel do you have. Nowadays, you have electric battery cars. Okay, electric battery needs charging point for your car to be charged every time it runs out of fuel. A conventional car will need the diesel or petrol in it. How much fuel do you have? Will it enable you to go out of the porch, out of the gate, to go 5 miles or 50 miles or 500 miles? It depends on the fuel, the energy. So there are two things needed. A, politics has to come to a point where they function reasonably, so it doesn't misfire. The engine doesn't misfire, doesn't lurch, doesn't come to a halt. The engine has to keep working. Two, you need the energy security. The fuel has to be there for you to be able to undertake industrialization and proceed. That is what SAARC needs to be able to do. We have the idea of a brilliant car, but we have not been able to figure out how the politics will start the engine and whether we have the fuel. Now, I believe that SAARC countries themselves have all the energy they need without having to import from anywhere. We have not been able to do it, and it's clean energy. We have not been able to do it because we are not able to talk to each other, or we will ban one country doing something else. So these are basically, I think, problems in the mindset. These are problems of how we approach an issue. And we have become prisoners and hostage to the legends and narratives that we have grown up with. We need to break. And yes, involving youth, you raised a very, very important point. This is the point. We used to have, once upon a time, long, long ago, about 60, 70 years ago, when my memory goes back, student exchanges among high school and university students, going across, visiting different, at that time there was no SAARC, but visiting different neighboring countries, mainly India and Pakistan. But I think some also went to Sri Lanka. Arrange programs like that. You may not be able to, addressing your question about having separate SAARC universities. This is where the SAARC university concept actually crashed. Forming 7 different universities to do the same thing, you have satellite universities with one doing the programming. You have digital connectivity, you do online courses, and teachers can teach each other from others. That is one way. But I think there is value to students actually crossing border, living with the dormitories of fellow students in a country considered hostile, learning what the metaphor of talking to each other is and concept is, to break the walls in the mind. The biggest problem that we have is not the walls of the barbed wire on the fencing. It is the walls and the barbed wires inside our minds. And we are not able to address those walls and barbed wires in the mind. Once we start addressing those, the other walls will immediately start coming down. And I think so it's a conceptual way of how you look at this problem, and then you try to resolve. Because trying to resolve it in the conventional manner, in the Westphalian mode that we are prisoners of, is not going to work. Thank you.
Being mindful, just very briefly, if Mr.
I will
Samsul.
just take 1 minute addressing Madam Professor from Jawaharlal University, relevant to your question. But before that, I wanted to share one ideas I have been facing since I worked for SAARC. SAARC does not have a university. Many of you might be surprised. SAARC has one university called South Asian University. All SAARC regional centers are named after SAARC. But my question is, I never raised it, but I had this question. Why South Asia University is named as South Asia University in Delhi? It is actually funded by SAARC, sponsored by SAARC. So I was a member of the governing body for 5 years of this university, but still my question is not answered by them. So at this point, what I want to say, SAARC as a technology education or skills center can be hosted by Bangladesh. At this stage, we need permission from the approval from the SAARC countries, the SAARC governing bodies of South Asian University, as well as it can be started as its center or one of the university, since SAARC was born in Bangladesh. With this keeping in mind as a gesture from the government, one of the university can be allowed to open a technology skill training center or institute under one of the university. It is my humble suggestion to the Honorable Foreign Minister, State Foreign Minister. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Once again, my sincere gratitude to the keynote speaker, the panelists, and all of you who share your thoughts. As promised, we will consolidate those and in the form of a recommendation, policy recommendation, share with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other concerned agencies. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we come to the final segment of today's seminar. As I highlighted before, we are extremely honored and privileged to have amongst us Excellency Ms. Shama Obaid Islam MP, the Honorable State Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, who along with the Honorable Minister and Advisor sits at the apex or helm of the affair, who has the major responsibility in taking, I think, pragmatic steps in revitalizing SAARC. And just to remind you, even before coming to the power, the current government, the political party, in their election manifesto clearly mentioned that revitalizing SAARC is one of their primary agenda. So I'm sure the Honorable State Minister with her team has a vision and a pathway. So we would like to hear from you, madam. We seek your kind directives and guidance.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to all. Distinguished Chair, DG of BASE, Excellencies, distinguished guests, our keynote speaker, and the esteemed panelists and the youth that have participated today. I would like to thank Ambassador Tariq Anam for his detailed and very thought-provoking keynote speech, and Mr. Dr. Niloy Ranjan Bishwash and Mohammad Shamsul Haq for contributing immensely in today's seminar. And I would like to commend Bangladesh Institute of International Strategic Studies for organizing this timely discussion. The theme of today's seminar is highly relevant, not only for South Asian regional cooperation, but also for Bangladesh's foreign policy priorities. We meet at a time when regional cooperation is gaining renewed importance across the world. Regions are becoming more connected, more economically independent, and more conscious of the need to address common challenges together. Yet South Asia, despite its immense human, cultural, economic, and strategic potential, remains far less integrated than it should be. This is the challenge before us. South Asia is geographically close, historically connected, and culturally rich, but politically fragmented and economically under-integrated. Our task is to consider how the gap between potential and performance can be reduced. The founding vision was clear that peoples of South Asia share common challenges and common aspirations, and therefore they need a common platform. That need remains valid today. In fact, it has become more urgent. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no denying that SAARC has faced serious difficulties. The summit process has remained stalled. Political trust has been weak. Regional integration has not reached its expected level. Bilateral tensions and unresolved disputes have repeatedly affected the organization's momentum. As a founding member and the birthplace of SAARC, Bangladesh has every reason to reflect on whether it has done enough to uphold the organization's founding ideals and help arrest its gradual stagnation. More importantly, this is a moment for collective introspection by all member states. Just imagine how far South Asia could have progressed had we truly embraced SAARC as our shared institution and matched its promise with sustained commitment and political will over the past 4 decades, especially over the last 17 years. Instead, those years have become a story of missed opportunities. SAARC remains politically constrained but institutionally relevant. Its charter remains in force. Its secretariat continues to function. Its specialized bodies and regional centers continue to operate. Its legal instruments, technical networks, and institutional memory remain available to us. Any serious effort to revitalize SAARC must begin with an honest diagnosis. SAARC has been affected by political mistrust, unresolved bilateral disputes, cross-border tensions, power asymmetry, and competing security perceptions. Long-standing India-Pakistan tensions have made consensus difficult and have often slowed regional initiatives. But SAARC's challenges are not only political, they are also institutional. The organization needs stronger implementation capacity, greater financial strength, more effective specialized mechanisms, and a practical culture of follow-up. Revitalization, therefore, requires both political goodwill and institutional repair. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of today's seminar rightly places trust at the center of the discussion. Trust is the foundation of regional integration. Without trust, connectivity becomes difficult, trade remains limited, and even technical cooperation becomes vulnerable to political tension. But trust does not always begin with grand declarations. It can also be built gradually through practical cooperation. Health experts sharing disease surveillance information, trade officials simplifying customs procedures, climate specialists working together on flood early warning, disaster management professionals preparing jointly for emergencies, and students, entrepreneurs, researchers, and cultural practitioners interacting across borders can all help create habits of cooperation. Such initiatives may appear modest, but they can reduce suspicion, create confidence, and gradually rebuild the foundation for wider regional engagement. One of the clearest indications of South Asia's underperformance is trade. The South Asian Free Trade Area, as SAFTA, continues to exist legally and administratively. However, it has not produced the dynamic regional market that South Asia needs. Sensitive lists, non-tariff barriers, para-tariff weak logistics, customs delays, poor standards, harmonization, and political tensions have all limited its effectiveness. A wiser approach is to revitalize SAARC from below through technical cooperation, institutional repair, practical projects, functional connectivity, and people-centered initiatives. As an initial step in the revitalization process, Bangladesh would like to see SAARC operate at an optimal functional level until the regional environment becomes fully conducive for full political and summit level revival. This phrase, optimal functional level, is important. It does not mean keeping SAARC alive only symbolically. It does not mean doing the bare minimum. It means doing the maximum that is realistically possible under current circumstances. It means being ambitious in spirit but realistic in method. An optimal functional SAARC would include regular technical and official meetings, a predictable calendar of activities, stronger specialized bodies, and regional centers cooperation in non-continuous areas, and visible outcomes for the peoples of South Asia. It should also follow flexible project-based cooperation among willing members. All member states may not be ready to join every initiative at the same time, but where several members are ready to cooperate, they should be able to move forward while keeping the door open for others. The flexibility is necessary for SAARC's continued relevance. At this note, I would like to iterate one thing that after we started, the new government in almost 4 months ago, I have spoken to all the member states separately, one-on-one, and all of them were very positive about revival of SAARC. So now I think it's about time that we put our wishes and our intent. The intent has to be actionable. So that is the time I think we should be working towards. The SAARC Development Fund has the potential to finance visible regional projects, but its leadership, governance, and operational capacity must be strengthened. A more effective SDF could support meaningful initiatives in health, agriculture, women-led enterprises, climate adaptation, rural development, and social development. Ladies and gentlemen, SAARC must also remain free from bilateral disputes. The SAARC Charter already provides that bilateral and contentious issues should not be brought into SAARC deliberations. This principle must be reaffirmed. The objective should not be force any two countries into political dialogue through SAARC. The objective should be to ensure that bilateral tensions do not paralyze every form of regional cooperation. At the same time, SAARC must remain an inclusive South Asian platform. Its value lies in bringing the region together within a cooperative framework. Therefore, we should keep the door open for all members while ensuring that agreed technical and developmental cooperation continues. Excellencies, another important question is the relationship between SAARC and other regional or sub-regional platforms, particularly BIMSTEC. Bangladesh does not need to choose between SAARC and BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC connects South Asia with the Bay of Bengal and Southeast Asia. SAARC represents the broader South Asian regional identity, including countries that are not part of BIMSTEC. These platforms should complement each other, not compete with each other. Sub-regional initiatives should not drain momentum away from SAARC. Rather, they should become building blocks for wider regional cooperation. Under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Tariq Rahman, a confident Bangladesh can support both SAARC and BIMSTEC because both serve our national interest in connectivity, stability, prosperity, and development. And our foreign policy tagline that we are all abiding by is Bangladesh first. Ladies and gentlemen, SAARC provides a platform where smaller states can speak collectively, where India can demonstrate constructive regional leadership, where Pakistan remains connected to a wider South Asian framework, and where shared problems can be addressed even when political disputes remain unresolved. For Bangladesh, this is also where history and future meet. SAARC carries a special historical meaning for us. It is a diplomatic legacy of late President Ziaur Rahman, whose vision helped place South Asian regional cooperation on the formal agenda. But that legacy is not only a matter of the past, it also speaks directly to Bangladesh's future. Bangladesh First is more than a slogan. In our foreign policy, it includes building a neighborhood that supports Bangladesh's security, trade, climate resilience, food security, connectivity, and global standing. In that sense, SAARC began as a Bangladeshi diplomatic vision, and today it can become an important instrument for Bangladesh's future. Ladies and gentlemen, our approach to SAARC is hopeful and realistic. We are optimistic and at the same time practical. We do not pretend that SAARC can return to full political normalcy overnight. At the same time, we do not accept the defeatist claim that nothing can be done. Much can be done if the agenda is realistic, technical, people-centered, and charter compliant. The way forward is to preserve the institution, strengthen what still works, and repair what is weak and create cooperation where agreement is possible. That is how confidence can return. It is in the spirit that we are considering a calibrated set of confidence-building initiatives in the coming months, subject to consultation with SAARC member states. These maybe include engagement with the ambassadors and high commissioners of SAARC countries based in Dhaka, as well as consultations with SAARC Secretariat in Kathmandu regarding the convening of a senior officials meeting and the possibility of a special session of the Council of Ministers. We may also consider wider diplomatic outreach of the highest political level. Ladies and gentlemen, SAARC is waiting for wise leadership, practical cooperation, and renewed confidence. Bangladesh is ready to contribute to that confidence. And I am very hopeful, I'm more hopeful today attending this seminar because the vibrant presence of all sectors and the civil society of our country, and especially I'm so happy to see the youth participating. So I believe that if the will is there, I think we can definitely work towards reviving SAARC. I thank BIS once again for organizing this important seminar, and I look forward to the thoughtful discussions and recommendations. And all the recommendations and the discussions that were documented and given today, I think that's well documented. Foreign Ministry will definitely take into account all the inputs and all the important points that you have made in different areas, how we can actually think out of the box and actually make SAARC a reality. So thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your seminal speech, highlighting the initiatives that has been taken by the new government in consonance with the regional partners in revitalizing SAARC. So taking inspiration from that, I, on behalf of BIS, can reassure that this event will not be a standalone one. This will be mere the initiation of the process of a more rigorous endeavor. From mega concepts, gradually we'll dive into micromanagement of domains that have been identified to be productive and subsequently synthesizing for optimal return and real functionality of SAARC. So once again, on behalf of BIS, allow me to express my sincere gratitude to the Honorable Chief Guest, the distinguished panelists and speakers, all participants, and particularly the media representatives for being here with us and sharing your thoughts. I extend also my gratitude to the organizing team of BIS and all others who dedicated their hard work in organizing this seminar. So thank you once again. And with this, with the kind permission of the chief guest, I would like to conclude the session here. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to request everyone to remain seated for a few more minutes. As a token of gratitude, we would like to hand over souvenirs to the Honorable Chief Guest, the keynote presenter, and two distinguished panelists. May I now request the Director General of BISS to hand over souvenirs first to the Honorable Chief Guest, then to the keynote presenter, and to distinguished panelists. I now request the Honorable Chief Guest and the distinguished